What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Hands-On channel. Today I've got a really big one that I want to get into today. It's basically the top 5, I guess, predictions. I don't really want to say that, but the top 5 predictions that could bring on our imminent demise. SHTF collapse of everything. Think Walking Dead, except no zombies. Instead of zombies, it would just be hordes and hordes of people that didn't prepare for the SHTF collapse. And they're out there in force right now. So to get into this, as always, I'm going to have my anti-communist glasses. I highly recommend you guys get some, and they're sort of like the They Live glasses, that once you put these on, you start seeing the world for what it really is, rather than the illusion that they try to pull over your eyes all the time. Well, usually it's quite odd that I guess it's not really odd here in America. It's the standard, but usually our government, our federal government especially, is very clandestine. They hide things, they do things in such a way, and if you question things, they typically label you as a conspiracy theorist. And if you don't know, I've done entire videos about the origin of the term conspiracy theory, and really it's not the origin, but you can check that out. It's basically the CIA. It was a word or a phrase or a saying that was weaponized by the CIA. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was during the what was the thing called where John F. Kennedy was shot and all, the Warren Commission. I knew it would come to me if I said JFK. Anyway, during the Warren Commission, a lot of people were like, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. You haven't had enough time to do a proper investigation. WTF is going on here? And so the CIA weaponized the phrase conspiracy theory, or the term, so that they could, make people look bad and discredit them in the eyes of the rest of the population, so that anyone that heard anything outside of the ordinary, after a while, would just immediately start saying, oh, that person is a conspiracy theorist. Well, it's interesting because many of these things are conspiracies, okay? I'm not exactly saying that this is a conspiracy, but many of the things that we have seen and we've discovered, especially since Trump came into office, about the improper spending and a lot of that stuff, people had to conspire behind the scenes to make that a reality. But anyway, today, as I was thinking about all this different stuff and the top 5 reasons, or the top 5 causes potentially for real SHTF collapse. I know we've talked about it ad nauseum here on the channel, but I think it's a very important topic that, it deserves further discussion. So I hope that we can spark a discussion down in the comments. I'm actually going to use a little bit of coded language today. I don't like to do that. I like to be very blunt, upfront, to the point. But I'm not going to be able to do that today because I actually went and I did a little bit of research before I made the title of my video here, and before I talked about this topic, because it's sort of forbidden. It's not really forbidden in the rules or regulations, or what do they call it? The guidelines or whatever for YouTube. It's not listed, but this is something that I've noticed over the years of producing video content. Is some of my most researched stuff that I work the hardest on will be my least viewed things. Whenever I have a whole bunch of data and stuff like that I'm trying to put down in video format so that people will wake up and go do their own research, right? I'm not saying ever that I'm the end all, be all, know it all of all this stuff, because I'm not. There's so much. There's such a plethora of information coming in daily that none of us could possibly keep up with it, unless that was our 100% full-time job, and even then you wouldn't be able to keep up with that stuff. So the title of this paper here that I threw together is called Globalist Elites, and how they have a big, we'll call it Depop. Hopefully that doesn't get me flagged, but they have a big Depop plan for 2025. And sadly, this is something I've noticed since Trump's, staggering, amazing victory, where he won not only the popular vote, but the Electoral College. That was all great stuff, because that took away a lot of the globalists and the liberals' arguments of why Trump is bad, orange man bad, right? So that's all great news. And a lot of us have kind of slacked off on our prepping. And I'm just going to say it. Sadly, a lot of preppers have gone back to sleep. And, you know, I get it. Things seem better. It's like, hey, you know, we worked really hard all throughout 2024 to expose what Biden was doing, and 2023, all the years that Biden was in there, here on my channel. And I know many other channels have seen a lot of the same things and reported on them that, you know, were going on during the Biden administration, and they were really worried about it. And they could see, okay, if this happens, then that's going to happen, and that could collapse the economy, let's say, or that could cause this to happen, XYZ, a chain of events, or World War III, or any of these other things that are, you know, major disasters that we need to try to stay out of if we can. But yeah, a couple of days ago, my wife and I were talking about how we have actually slacked off on our prepping and just keeping on top of things, because it seems like, you know, and maybe we deserve it, but it's like a sigh of relief has happened. But again, we don't want to go to sleep, because if we forget all the things that we've already known, or we just, you know, we start, you know, looking at things in a different light, where we're like, well, yeah, it's possible that World War III could happen, but man, we got this guy Trump. He's going to fix all our problems, and he's going to do it in about 1 week. If you don't know what I'm quoting a line from Idiocracy. If you don't know that movie, I highly suggest you go watch it, because a lot of the stuff that happens in that satirical movie actually turn out to be real life things that we're facing right now in 2025. So Idiocracy is becoming reality. But yeah, I mean, I do get it. Trump's doing an amazing job so far with the federal government. None of us have seen anything like this. No one, I mean, I guess you could say Bill Clinton cut some of the government, but he didn't cut it down like Trump is cutting it down. This is freaking amazing. But, you know, it could have long-lasting repercussions. I don't think anything that Trump is doing, like with the tariffs or any of those sorts of deals, or, you know, kind of wagging the dog, so to speak, or using threats, using the art of the deal to try to make deals happen around the world. I don't think any of that stuff is bad necessarily by itself. But you and I all know that those globalists, just because Trump won the election, doesn't mean they're going to back off on their NWO plan. You know, I think the most conclusive plan that I've read is called Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and more specifically, look into their 17 sustainable goals. I think that's what they call it, 17 sustainable goals, okay? That's what you need to dig into. And each one of those things is catastrophic to a sovereign nation, or to liberty-loving patriots that want to remain free in a self-governance type of an environment like the United States of America. So, that being said, we're going to talk about some data that I've covered before. And again, when I covered this data, my video got banned, or shadow banned, let's put it that way. It was still allowed to play on the platform, but they did not promote it here on YouTube. So before I made the video here, I went over to YouTube and typed into the search engine thing up there at the top, what we're going to call the Beagle Report. Okay? Hopefully, I know that my main audience is going to know exactly, they're going to smell exactly what I'm stepping in. And it's a big old stinking pile of fresh, I mean, you've been feeding your dog wet food. That's how bad this shit is going to stick to your shoe, okay? And that's how it sticks into my brain. That's why I use that sort of crude analogy or reference all the time, is so that you guys will see what I'm talking about and maybe get some attention here, and maybe you'll spread this with your friends, because that's the only way we're going to break through this crap. Just to back up for just a millisecond here, the reason that I was talking about all that, about the clandestine nature of our modern governments and stuff, and it ain't just the U.S., it's all around the world. Your government is lying to you, and, you know, they're pissing on your leg and telling you it's raining outside all the time. And most of us are sick and tired of it. We're sick and tired of the mainstream media lying their asses off. We know it's Operation Mockingbird. It never ended. But anyway, I went over to YouTube search engine and I typed in the Beagle Report. You know, I used the proper spelling, but I typed it in on there. And I found one guy's playlist up at the top, and it had a bunch of stuff. But then as I scrolled through, there was nothing else in any of the results that indicated that. I mean, it was talking about America predicts war with China, and, Project 2025 exposed, the liberals' worst nightmare, right? Going back to a conservative type U.S. government, right? The liberals' worst nightmare. Lancet study predicts huge decline in world pop, right? I mean, there's just numerous things like this. Anything they can give me to get me off of the scent of the Beagle report. So if you don't know what in the hell I'm talking about, you need to go do some digging on this Beagle report. Okay, I bet you, even if you're not on Google, I bet you if you're on DuckDuckGo or one of those other search engines, you'll probably be able to type in actually the Beagle report, and it'll probably correct you to the right name. Okay, this is important stuff. All right, I mean, I wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't. So what is the Beagle report? Let's do a quick summary on that, because one of my great commenters on the first video I did about this, probably a month ago or so, not too far back in the history of my channel. So if you want to go find that, you should be able to find it pretty easily. It's related to Depop and stuff like that. And again, that video was heavily shadow banned. So I'm trying to beat the algorithm. One of the ways you guys can help me do that is by sharing, liking, commenting, subscribing, all those other things that are important metrics to the YouTube algorithm, right? So what is this thing? Well, it's a prediction paper that's basically it's like a think tank group, okay? But these are not just any ordinary people. They've been kind of hand selected, if you will, by clandestine alphabet agencies, and we'll get into that here in a minute. But the Beagle report predicted a 80 to 90% populate. Oh shit! So the Beagle report predicted an 80 to 90% pop redux, okay, in 2025. In 2025, the very year that we're, McFly, wake up, McFly. The very year we're actually living in right now, okay? So that's why it's super freaking important that we spread this information and we show people. Maybe it doesn't happen, okay? I'm willing to admit that. I mean, it's a pretty big thing. 80 to 90% reduction, that's a big deal. It might be inclusive of you and your family and your offspring and your cousins and your friends and everybody you've ever known, okay? Nobody's excluded from this number. I mean, I guarantee you the globalists have got a certain group of people in mind that they want to keep alive, if at all possible, and the rest of them, one of my commenters pointed out last time that I didn't actually explain exactly what the Beagle report was and why it matters, so I'm going to try to do that real quickly here before we get into the list, because I'm trying to actually move along here as quickly as possible. So, what is it? And why does it matter? Well, the Beagle is a think tank that was formed by the CIA, the NSA, and others inside the Beltway. It has been described as a minor branch of U.S. military intelligence. Beagle described itself as a cross-reference of openly available think tank predictions from numerous branches of the U.S. military, the IMF. I think that stands for International Monetary Fund. That's a group right there that deserves a whole video and a whole bunch of research, because there's a whole host of really weird things that are tied in with this IMF, and you need to look it up on its own. The video would be 10 hours long if I went into every one of these things, and then nobody would watch it, so that wouldn't work. And there's others in that group, in those groups as well, that helped to form this Beagle report and this group Beagle. So in 2014, that's when this thing came out, a long time ago now, right? I mean, before, the COVID hysteria, before so many things, before Biden came in under the weird conditions and circumstances that he took office, it was stolen. That's what I'm hinting at. See, that's my problem. I'm too damn straightforward. I'm too blunt sometimes, but that's me, and hopefully you like that. I find that refreshing in other people when they're direct, blunt, and to the point. As long as they're not mean and assholey about it or whatever, then that's the best way to communicate, because you're getting your information out there without a whole bunch of filler. So back in 2014, numbers predicted the effects of the collapse of the Western banking system, okay? and it was going to lead to the decline in the U.S. POP from 318 million down to a mere 78 million, okay, by 2025. And the U.S. economy going from number 1 to number 13 in the world. Okay, so that was the first time that I'd ever heard anyone actually give a reason, a cause for what this coming collapse was what's going to bring this on. See, I've studied the Eagle Report for years. I don't know if I saw it the first time in 2014, right when it came out. It might have been 15 or 16 before I first discovered this. I'm thinking it was in 2015 when I read through some forum somewhere that turned me on to this Beagle report. It's worth investigating because it ain't just the U.S. It's all Western countries. So, but yeah, that was interesting to me after all of my years and years and years of reading about this, reporting about it here on the channel, having conversations down in the comments, trying to figure out what in the hell could bring on a 90% pop reduction in 2025, okay? Because I'm a prepper, because I'm a father, because I'm a husband, because I'm a son-in-law, because I'm a son, okay? And you are too, probably, or something along those lines. And you got people you care about. You don't want them disappearing into the ether because of some weird rando thing that you never thought about. So that's why I try to think about all these things and I report on them. So let's quickly go over the numbers of the lives that will be lost, dead, okay, according to Beagle. So number 1, the G7 countries are clustered near the top of the list for some strange reason. Their percentage of population reductions are as follows. Number 1, the UK, they're going to lose 78.5%. They're at the top of the list. It's very interesting, isn't it? And especially when you consider how our economies are intertwined, okay? This global economy that everybody promised us was going to save us all, okay? Right? The petrodollar and all that shit's at risk right now. So what they predicted actually makes a lot of sense. And especially once these globalists start realizing, hey, we can push back over here against what the United States and what Trump is doing. I guarantee you there are saboteurs in his ranks all around him, because you can't help it, man. These people, they get in there and they might be good at first, but then later they're corrupted and they start, so while it's been great seeing a polar opposite of what was going on with the last administration, I'm very worried about not only, they could try to JFK Trump, they could do any number of things to limit his ability to make America great again, because they don't want America to be great. They want us to be pushed down and pushed down and pushed down and suppressed until they can destroy us, because that's the end goal. Freedom is not in alignment. Freedom and liberty and the founding principles of the United States government are not in alignment at all with the globalist agenda. So next on the list, number 2 is the USA. They say we're going to have a 70.2% reduction in the thing that shall not be named. So hopefully you smell what I'm stepping in again. Germany, 65%. That's how many they're going to lose. Okay, that's a big number. France, 41.8%. Italy, 30.6%. And lastly, Canada at 29.7%. So all of these are G7 countries. Okay? And they're all very Western countries. When you read the Deagle report and you study it in depth, you'll notice Eastern countries and Russia and several other large prominent nations right now, actually some of their populations go up. So something is going on here. Some funny business is going on here. And I'm telling you, these people at Deagle wouldn't have put this out unless there was some truth behind it, okay? Or a possibility, a very good possibility, maybe even on the level of, or on the teetering edge of probability. That's where I think we are with this particular event. Lastly here, Japan, they were on the next page, so I almost missed them here, but they're going to lose about 17.6% of their people. It's kind of a big deal, right? So here are my top 5 collapse scenarios for 2025 that could make these predictions reality. I'm going to do it in least likely to most likely order, although I really don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just basing this on the research that I've done over the years. You guys might have put it in a different order. If you think there's other things that I forgot, please let me know down in the comments so we can continue this discussion. Number 5, natural disasters. Of course, we've all seen a lot of stuff in this last year or so with the epic floods out there on the East Coast. Like several of those places are still just digging out the flood debris because, it was such an epic, almost, it wasn't quite biblical level, but it was, if you were living there, you might think it was biblical level if you've never seen anything like that, and suddenly it comes in on you and washes away your house right in front of your eyes. There ain't nothing you can do about it except watch it go and hope like hell that you took care of all your animals and, you got your family out and all that stuff. But many people didn't, and it was horrific. So, we've got that always, or that's always in the back of my mind, that the Bible talks about it, all the people on the earth, or at least all of them except for Noah and his family, they were all, corrupted by crazy, weird genetics. If you read the whole story about Genesis 6, you'll understand that, these Nephilim came down to earth, fallen angels came down to earth and decided to procreate with women, human women. They liked them. They wanted to, what was so weird about it is that, or what's so interesting about it to me, it's not necessarily that they were wanting for these human women sexually. I think they actually wanted something that humanity had been granted according to God and according to the Bible. If you don't believe that, that's fine. But that's what I believe. They wanted something that humanity was granted. 2 things: dominion over the earth, which they did not have, and the ability to produce offspring. Sorry guys, I'm fighting with a scratchy voice. I've been in and out of this super cold weather trying to keep my rabbits alive because it's been just freezing up every 3 or 4 hours. I have to go out there and change out their waters, and my chickens and my quail, check on everybody. So who knows, I may get sick in a couple of days after all this. But anyway, biblical level floods, and a lot of people always say, oh, well, it wasn't as bad. Maybe it was regional, right? But there's proof all over the planet that there's like little pieces of crustacean fossils and stuff like that, and on very high ground in the United States of America. So you could argue that that's a form of proof that there was at some point biblical level floods where, maybe Mount Everest or something like that might have still been poking out, but everything else was underwater, even mountains. So it's kind of a big deal. That could happen again. Who knows? I believe it was caused by God, and he, pointed his finger or snapped his finger or just had a thought and it happened. I don't know how that works, but I know it did happen according to the Bible, and I tend to believe it. Some scientists have said over the years that there's actually giant oceans, even bigger than the oceans that we have on the surface, more water volume inside of the earth. So is it possible that something happened, some natural disaster event, and it pushed that extra ocean water out to the surface, and then suddenly everything's underwater? It's possible. Next up, sudden pole shift. We've heard scientists postulating and talking and doing research about this, that they believe that the Earth's poles have shifted multiple times over the years, and they're actually shifting right now. It's just happening in kind of a slow motion thing. But you guys could imagine what it would be like. If you've ever had a bicycle growing up or something, and you tried to ride it on a flat tire with the drive wheel, the tire would spin over the rim, right? It's a similar concept. You have this hot ball of magma or whatever the hell it is. We don't even really know for sure what it is, but there's something that's like the engine of the earth inside of there. It creates our magnetism and everything else, and it's spinning around. I don't really understand it. Our scientists don't really understand it completely. They probably have some ideas, but they don't really fully get it because we haven't been down that deep. But there could be a sudden pole shift. What if that happened? and suddenly the United States of America is in the position on the globe where the North Pole is, or something like that. I don't know if it's still true to this day, but at one time they called the United States the breadbasket of the world. But it really doesn't matter, because if the United States moves, everybody else moves as well. So it would throw our climate into chaos. We wouldn't be able to grow food if suddenly we had the sunlight and the temperatures of the North Pole. So is that possible? Yeah, it's probably not very probable or likely, but it is possible. So it's something that we should be prepared for. I don't know that there's really any, there's definitely not a bunker deep enough or anything you could do that would change that outcome. So some of these things, there's really no prepping for them except for just knowing about them, right? Next up, I kind of touched on it a second ago, but basically Earth's magnetic field could be, they say it's getting weaker all the time, and I wonder about some of that stuff. Are they really telling us the truth, or are they just trying to make us watch some show that they've created to scare us and stuff like that, because they know fear sells? I don't know, but I'm sure it's possible. And maybe it is true that Earth's magnetic field is weakening over time or whatever. Now, how big a deal is that? I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe it has something to do with our gravity. I don't know. And I'm not sure that the scientists really know either. Next up on my list of natural disasters is the possibility of like super volcanic activity. Okay, so I want you to think like, again, we've seen all this, fear porn, I guess is what I'll call it. This stuff that these shows that these, PBS groups put out, these, it's like scientainment or something. It's sort of meant to put you on the edge of your seat, and they give you little bits of science here and there, and then they speculate a whole lot about it. But anyway, super volcanic activity, and I'm talking about big stuff like Yellowstone. Okay, we've heard about the Yellowstone caldera. It's like a giant earth pimple. Okay, and underneath there is a whole bunch of earth pus that wants to come out for some reason. Nobody really knows why, except for pressure and plates and shifts and different, who the hell knows. But they claim it's been bulging up, and some weird stuff's been going down over there at Yellowstone for 4 or 5 years now. Again, what could you do about that? And if that is the case, then why would England have been so affected by this reduction? I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I'm just throwing it out there and seeing what sticks to the wall here on some of these things. But, next up here, you could have a solar flare such as the Carrington event of 1859. And just briefly here, I'll describe that. There was basically this massive solar flare when it does a CME, coronal mass ejection. It's basically like a sun fart or a sun burp, and it just poof, spits some shit out in your general direction. Most of the time, it goes the other way and it misses the Earth, because we're always moving around in space, right? But sometimes they hit the Earth. And when they do, when it's a direct CME hit on the Earth, it can cause some bad problems with the electrical grid. Now, in 1859, the only thing we had was telegraph lines up. But allegedly, it caught them on fire in many cases. It also started random fires in really dry places, like my throat. So anyway, it would start fires and stuff like that. Random weird things that you wouldn't think about. It can fry electronics. It's basically the same sort of thing as an EMP as far as the end result, okay? Obviously, an EMP is man-made versus a solar flare, which is, I guess, God-made or universe-made, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, that could happen. I mean, that's probably more like, you see what we're doing here. We're getting more and more likely to some sort of a major event that could cause the Beagle report to be accurate. Next up here, comet or meteor impact event. Okay, we've seen the holes all around the Earth. Again, another PBS special that I've seen over the years, replayed dozens and dozens of times. There's the big giant one, and I can't remember the name of that place, but it's over in Russia somewhere. And apparently it hit like in, I'm wanting to say late 1800s, early 1900s, as far as they could tell. And it just basically took all the trees in this massive, super dense forest and it just laid them all down like toothpicks. So whatever the hell this thing was, it had quite an impact. Something like that, it could, if it was big enough, it could end all life on Earth. But I've often wondered, whenever the new president comes in, could you imagine the briefings that they go through? I mean, like, they're like, we got this scientific evidence from Antarctica that's showing that there's fixing to be a major pole shift, or the magnetic field's going to collapse, or, a comet or a meteor impact is coming. Maybe they know something that they're not telling us, because we all know they're not going to tell us, because people would freak the fuck out, okay? They'd be panicking, panic buying, going to the stores, buying all the gas, on and on and on. So I don't care who the president is, they're not going to cause that sort of panic in the general population, because they know that eventually people come into town with the tars and the feathers and stuff like that, and they'll be hell to pay. So, I mean, again, how likely is that? I don't know if it's super likely, but it's possible. Next up, we've got worldwide earthquake event. And, such is the type. Again, I'm like a broken record here, but, it says it in the Bible, in Revelations. They talk about it. One of the things that God promised us was He's not going to do the same thing again. He gave us the rainbow, which we allowed to be hijacked by a certain group of alphabet people. But anyway, as a promise, that rainbow was a promise that He would never flood the earth again like that, like He did during Noah's flood. Instead, they talk about earthquakes all over the world, okay? Unescapable earthquakes. It could happen. It could happen, okay? So those are the natural disasters. That was number 5. Now these are going to go much faster, because number 5, again, I did these from least likely to most likely. So I believe number 5, natural disasters, is probably the least likely thing to happen. And we're going to get into the most likely thing at the very end here, number 1. But back into our list, number 4, worldwide cyber attack. So sort of like the one Klaus Schwab talked about during his one of his big WEF meetings. He talked about this event called Cyber Polygon, where all of the world's internet, because it's so connected, if they put some sort of a virus or some sort of a deal like that on there, it could wipe out the internet. And since we're so heavily dependent and reliant on the internet for our everyday basic needs, it could cause, let's just say, some crazy stuff to happen. Maybe even full-scale collapse could happen as a result of cyber attack, depending on who did it and how big and wide scale it was. So I think that's pretty damn likely. Number 3, electromagnetic pulse weapons could be used. Again, similar effects to what would happen with a solar flare. It would most likely wipe, or at least it's predicted that it would wipe out our modern power grid, because we're not protected against EMP. Although several people, senators and congressmen over the years, have tried to get Congress to pay attention and harden up our electric grid, but they just won't for some reason. Instead, they have to send, billions and billions of dollars to foreign countries for transgender stuff and weird stuff that most American people would not approve of. Number 2, most likely thing that could bring on the reality of the Beagle predictions: full-scale thermonuclear warfare. I'm talking World War III nuclear, because it probably will go nuclear pretty early on, I would argue, depending on which buttons get pushed. So there's not a lot for me to say about that, except for that's one of the worst possibilities we can imagine, because if it happens, they could end up, not only wiping out a lot of human life instantly, but the radioactivity that would be left behind would be devastating for anyone that was on the receiving end of a thermonuclear war attack, so bad deal. At least with EMPs, it doesn't put radioactive poison all over your ground and in your water. So that's a big deal. So last but not least, I feel like we need a drum roll here. Drum roll, please. Number 1, economic collapse. Again, there are people in high places such as the IMF, the WEF, the UN, on and on and on. You know, the Club of Rome. There have been people throughout the ages that have conspired to bring down the United States of America. And one of the quickest ways they could do that is to destroy our economy. Because people aren't going to put up with that crap for very long when they find out they've been saving money and it's worthless. So that's my list, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this. Is there something I forgot about? Which one of these? I said that I think economic collapse is probably the most likely thing. And the reason why I came to that conclusion is because of what I saw reported on the Beagle report. Okay, I don't know where this source is. I tried to find it, but that was the first time I'd ever heard that, where they were talking about the collapse of the Western banking system will lead to the decline of the U.S. pop. So I'm sorry for the coded words here. I'm sorry I'm not able to put the proper title in my thumbnail. It's not clickbait. It's just that I've got to get around the algorithm. I've got to figure it out, or else I've got to hang it up, because I'm not going to work as hard as I worked on my last video and only get like 250 views. It's just not worth it. It's not worth my time. It's not worth the risk that I'm taking by exposing a lot of this stuff that, you know, to some of you guys that have been in this for a while, you've heard this stuff before. So it's nothing really, no revelations, nothing really super new. But to the powers that be, this is the forbidden topic that you're not supposed to talk about. So again, if you want your friends to know about this stuff and be prepared, you probably ought to share it. Or at least, if you don't want to share my video because my voice keeps cracking up, I get it. Take my words, take my research, and go do it yourself. Tell them yourself. You can pretend like you came up with it all on your own if you want, but I didn't. I went and researched a whole bunch of stuff, and I tried to share it with you guys. I hope you like it. I hope you appreciate it. I hope you'll come in the comments, and we'll continue the conversation. As always, I stand for liberty to the bitter end. And now I think I'm going to go get a shot of whiskey to clear this shit out of my throat. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you next time.